Why do some people consistently perform at their peak while others with equal talent fall short? The difference rarely comes down to natural ability. It comes down to mental discipline, and nobody understood this better than Epictetus. Picture this: a crippled former slave, standing in front of Rome's most privileged young men, teaching them how to excel at life. These students had every advantage. Epictetus lacked wealth, status, perfect health, and freedom from birth. Yet they traveled across the city to learn from him, because he possessed something they couldn't buy: the secret to performing at your absolute best, regardless of circumstances. Epictetus arrived in Rome around 68 AD as property of Epaphroditus, a powerful secretary to Emperor Nero. While serving in that household, Epictetus absorbed Stoic philosophy from a teacher named Musonius Rufus. What he learned transformed him from a powerless slave into a master of his own mind. After gaining freedom around 93 AD, he opened a philosophical school that attracted students from across the Roman Empire, including the future Emperor Hadrian, and students who would teach Marcus Aurelius. Today you're getting 12 practical secrets Epictetus taught for performing at your peak. These aren't motivational slogans or quick fixes. They're tested strategies from a man who started with nothing and built a legacy that survived 2,000 years. Whether you're building a business, raising children, pursuing athletic excellence, or just trying to show up better every day, these principles will change how you approach performance. Before we start, subscribe to Stoic Forge if you want more ancient wisdom applied to modern excellence. We release new content every week. Now let's dive into Epictetus's secrets. Secret 1. Focus only on your own work. Epictetus opened his Enchiridion with the most fundamental principle: some things are up to us, and some are not. Up to us are opinion, impulse, desire, aversion, and in some, whatever is our own doing. Not up to us are body, property, reputation, office, and in some, whatever is not our own doing. This distinction is the foundation of peak performance. Most people waste massive energy worrying about factors outside their control: competitors' actions, judges' opinions, market conditions, other people's choices. This scattered attention guarantees mediocre results. When Epictetus was a slave in Epaphroditus's household, he couldn't control his schedule, his location, or even his own body. His master owned his time and labor, but Epictetus discovered he had complete control over his attention and effort. He could choose to study philosophy during whatever free moments existed. He could choose his attitude toward his work. Those choices belonged entirely to him, and he protected them fiercely. One of his students complained that an opponent had been cheating during athletic competition. Epictetus asked, "Can you control what your opponent does?" The student admitted he couldn't. Then why waste energy thinking about it? Focus entirely on your own training, your own technique, your own preparation. That's your actual work. His choices are his work. Here's your application. You're preparing for a presentation at work. Your actual work is researching thoroughly, organizing your material clearly, and practicing your delivery. The decision-maker's mood that day, not your work. Office politics affecting the decision, not your work. Pour your energy only into what you genuinely control. First there must be a flower, then the unripe fruit, then it must ripen. He understood that excellence requires patient, consistent preparation that exceeds what performance demands. You don't train for the minimum standard. You train beyond it so that actual performance feels manageable. Around age 30, while still enslaved, Epictetus began studying seriously under Musonius Rufus, one of Rome's leading Stoic teachers. Musonius was known for harsh training methods. He required students to practice poverty by sleeping on hard ground and eating plain food. He made them practice public speaking while being heckled. He assigned them to voluntarily endure uncomfortable situations to build resilience. Epictetus embraced this difficult training because he understood the principle: train harder than you'll perform. When actual hardship arrived, it felt familiar rather than overwhelming. When he faced exile decades later at age 60, he'd already mentally rehearsed losing everything. The secret is making your training environment more demanding than your performance environment. Then performance becomes the relief, not the challenge. The secret 3. Start each day with mental preparation. Epictetus taught a morning practice that prepared students for excellence. He said, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, today I will meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, violent, treacherous, envious, and unsociable." This wasn't pessimism. It was mental rehearsal that prevented surprise from disrupting performance. The students who expected smooth sailing got thrown off by the first obstacle. The students who anticipated challenges handled them calmly because they'd already mentally prepared. Before teaching each day, Epictetus spent time in thought. His student Arian, who recorded his lectures, noted that Epictetus seemed never to be caught off guard by student questions or challenges. He'd already considered likely scenarios and prepared responses. Start your own morning practice. Before checking your phone or rushing into your day, spend 5 minutes mentally walking through likely challenges. Your commute might be delayed. A coworker might be difficult. Your plan might need adjusting. Don't dwell on these negatively. Just acknowledge them as possibility. Then decide in advance how you'll respond with excellence. This practice removes the surprise factor that destroys performance. When challenges arrive, you recognize them as scenarios you've already rehearsed. Secret 4. Measure yourself by effort, not outcomes. Epictetus made a crucial distinction that freed his students from performance anxiety. He taught, what decides whether you've done well, not the outcome, which you don't fully control. What decides is whether you used your judgment well and tried your best with what was in your power. As a slave, Epictetus couldn't control whether his work would earn praise or punishment. Epictetus might be in a good mood or a terrible one. The quality of Epictetus's work mattered less than his master's whims. Instead of letting this crush him, Epictetus made a decision. He would judge himself only by whether he'd done his best with what he controlled. This internal standard of measurement protected his sense of competence and worth. When praise came, he appreciated it but didn't need it. When punishment came unfairly, it didn't destroy his self-assessment, because he knew he'd performed well by the only standard that mattered, his own effort and judgment. You're launching a new product. You can't control whether it becomes a massive hit. That depends on market timing, competition, and economic conditions. What you can control is the quality of your research, the care you take in development, and the excellence of your execution. Judge yourself by those standards, not by sales numbers in the first week. Secret 5. Eliminate excuses before you start. Epictetus had no patience for excuses. He told students, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. When students offered reasons for poor performance, he would ask, was the reason within your control? If yes, you chose poorly. If no, why are you calling it a reason? Slaves who made excuses received no sympathy. The work had to be done regardless of difficulty. Epictetus could have used his damaged leg as an excuse for limited mobility. He could have used his lack of formal education as an excuse for ignorance. Instead, he refused all excuses and found ways to perform regardless of constraint. One student explained he'd been too busy with social obligations to complete assignments. Epictetus asked, did you have time to sleep last night? The student said yes. Did you have time to eat? Yes again. Then you had time to study. You chose social obligations over learning. Own that choice instead of pretending circumstances prevented you. Eliminate excuses from your vocabulary starting now. Replace I didn't have time with I didn't prioritize it. Replace I couldn't focus because with I chose not to focus. This isn't self-punishment. It's accurate accountability that puts power back in your hands. He said, every skill is maintained and increased by the corresponding actions. Walking makes you better at walking. Running at running. If you want to be a good reader, read. If you want to be a good writer, write. Most people violate this principle constantly. They want to improve public speaking, but practice writing. They want better relationships, but read books instead of having difficult conversations. Under Musonius Rufus, Epictetus learned this through direct experience. Musonius didn't just lecture about philosophy. He required students to practice philosophical responses to real situations. Want to handle insults calmly? Then practice by receiving insults, until your calm response becomes automatic. When Epictetus opened his own school, he adopted the same approach. Students who wanted to overcome fear of poverty didn't just discuss poverty philosophically. Epictetus had them practice living on minimal resources for days at a time. Look at your current goal. What's the specific skill required? Practice the exact thing you want to improve. Not the adjacent thing. Not the easier thing. The actual thing itself. Epictetus. Secret 7. Welcome obstacles as training. Epictetus reframed obstacles in a way that transformed how students approached difficulty. He taught, difficulties show a person's character. Therefore, when a challenge confronts you, Remember that God is matching you with a younger sparring partner. Why? Becoming an Olympic victor takes sweat. His entire life validated this principle. His slavery was an obstacle to freedom, yet it became his training ground for understanding that external freedom matters less than internal freedom. His physical disability was an obstacle to full mobility, yet it became his demonstration that a healthy mind matters more than a healthy body. Around 95 AD, a student came to Epictetus devastated, because he'd lost a significant lawsuit. Epictetus asked, "What did you lose that belonged to you?" The student listed his money and reputation. Epictetus replied, "Those things never belonged to you. Now what did you gain? You gained the opportunity to practice resilience, to discover your character when external props are removed. Your difficult boss, your training in patience and communication under pressure, tight deadline, your training in focus and prioritization. The obstacle doesn't block the path, it creates the path." Epictetus 8 maintained consistency over intensence. Epictetus valued steady practice over dramatic efforts. He warned students, when you relax your attention for a while, don't imagine you'll recover it when you choose. That's impossible. Most people approach excellence with bursts of intense effort, followed by long periods of neglect. They work extremely hard for 2 weeks, burn out and quit for 2 months. Epictetus taught the opposite. Moderate daily practice that never stops produces far better results. As a slave, Epictetus couldn't choose when to work hard. He had to show up every single day regardless of mood, health, or motivation. This forced consistency became his advantage. While free men studied philosophy sporadically when inspired, Epictetus studied daily out of necessity. When Epictetus opened his school, he structured it around daily practice, rather than occasional intense sessions. Students showed up every day for small lessons. One day they'd practice responding to insults. The next day they'd practice simplifying desire. The lessons never felt dramatic in the moment, but accumulated over months. They created profound transformation. Don't aim for perfect. Aim for present. You don't need a 2-hour raw session when you're feeling motivated. You need a 20-minute practice session every single day regardless of motivation. The compound effect of small consistent action defeats large inconsistent effort every time. Secret 9. Remember your mortality during performance. Epictetus taught a practice that seems morbid, but actually enhances performance. He advised, let death and exile appear before your eyes each day, along with everything else that seems terrible. By doing this, you'll never have a base thought or excessive desire. When you remember you're going to die, 2 things happen. First, trivial anxieties shrink to their proper size. Your presentation nerves, your fear of looking foolish, your worry about what others think, all these concerns seem ridiculous when viewed against mortality. Second, you stop holding back. Epictetus lived with death as a close companion. As a slave, he had no guarantee of tomorrow. Later, even as a freedman, he knew his life remained fragile. When Emperor Domitian exiled all philosophers from Rome in 93 AD, Epictetus was around 60, already old by ancient standards. Yet Epictetus used mortality awareness to enhance rather than diminish his performance. In his lectures he said, I must die. If it's now, I'll die doing what I should. If later, then I'll do what I should now. And when death comes, I'll face it. Before your next important performance, remind yourself, someday I'll be dead. This moment is temporary. I'm going to do this fully because holding back makes no sense when time is limited. Secret 10. Compete only with your past self. Epictetus taught students to ignore comparison with others. He said, don't compare yourself with others. Compare yourself with who you were yesterday. Comparison with others guarantees misery and mediocre performance. There will always be someone more talented, more successful, more naturally gifted. During his years as a slave, Epictetus could have tortured himself by comparing his circumstances with free citizens. Instead, he compared himself only with who he'd been the day before. Did he understand philosophy better today than yesterday? Did he maintain his composure better? Teaching in Rome, Epictetus encountered constant comparison between students. One student complained that a classmate memorized texts faster. Epictetus asked, can you memorize faster this month than last month? Yes. Then you're improving. His speed is irrelevant to your progress. Track your progress against your previous self. Where were you 3 months ago? What have you learned since then? This comparison is both fair and motivating, because it measures what you genuinely control. He said, when you're preparing, question everything. When you're performing,
Trust your preparation and act. During preparation, Epictetus was ruthlessly critical. He would challenge every assumption, poke holes in every argument, and refuse to let students rest on easy answers. But when Epictetus taught publicly or advised students facing real decisions, he shifted completely. No more questioning, no more doubt. He delivered his teaching with full commitment. One student was paralyzed by overthinking. He'd prepared for a speech but kept revising it. The performance day arrived, and he still wanted to make changes. Epictetus told him, "The time for questioning your preparation has passed. You prepared as well as you could. Now trust it and speak. During preparation, be your own harshest critic. Question your assumptions. Test your idea. But when performance time arrives, turn off the critic completely. Trust that your preparation was sufficient, and perform with full commitment." He advised, "Each evening, examine your day. What did you do well? What did you do poorly? What should you repeat? What should you change?" This review practice is crucial for excellence, but it requires detachment. You're not judging yourself as good or bad. You're analyzing your performance like a scientist examining data. Each night after teaching, Epictetus would reflect on the day's lessons. Which examples landed with students? Which explanations created confusion? He didn't beat himself up over poor explanations. He noted them for improvement. One student felt discouraged after a poor performance in a public debate. Epictetus asked him to review what happened without emotion. What was the first question that threw you off? The student identified it. Why did it throw you off? The student realized he hadn't prepared for that angle. What will you do differently next time? Start your own nightly review. Spend 5 minutes before sleep, asking yourself, what was my best decision today? What was my worst? What did I learn? What will I do differently tomorrow? Write brief answers. Don't judge, just observe and extract lessons. Epictetus probably died around 35 AD in Nicopolis, Greece. He owned almost nothing when he died, but the performance secrets he taught shaped everyone from Marcus Aurelius to modern peak performers who still quote him 2,000 years later. You now have the same 12 secrets. Pick one secret that addresses your current performance challenge. Practice it exclusively for 1 week. Master it before adding the next one. These aren't ideas to admire. They're tools to use daily. If this video gave you practical strategies for performing at your peak, share it with someone who's struggling to do their best work right now. Subscribe to Stoic Forge for more deep dives into ancient wisdom for modern excellence. Your journey to peak performance starts with applying one of these secrets today. Epictetus proved it's possible regardless of your starting point. Now it's your turn to prove it in your own life.